Hey, welcome back to the Realm of History. Big quiz tomorrow, second one of the year. We got a little bit of an increase in the challenge level with MCQs coming your way on the AP portion. Let's get right into it. But before we do, hey, I want to make sure that we understand that this is a great time to get yourself ready to answer any of the questions that you might have going in your mind. So, make sure that you participate in the chat. Let me know that you're here so that we can kind of keep tabs of how people are doing on these quiz papers. And of course, if you're finding that these reviews are helpful to you, make sure that you put a like on this one. And if you haven't subscribed yet, hey, subscribe. And that way you won't miss any of the information throughout the year. Okay, today we're going to keep it pretty simple. We're going to have some key advice off the start. I'm going to go over some selected key terms this time, some of the figures, some of the places. We'll take a look quickly at some of the AP info. We'll close it off with a question and answer session, and then I'll maybe have some final advice at the end. Let's get going right into it with the key terms. So when we take a look at the key terms, I'm probably going to go over about 20 of them tonight. If you have any questions, though, mark them on your review sheet, and of course, put them into the chat as we get to the question and answer session. Okay, the first term of chapter 2 is going to be city-state. When we took a look at city-states, we marked it in our notes as a city and also its surrounding lands that functions as an independent political unit. So it's very similar to an independent kingdom. The example that I used in class was, think of Detroit City not being part of the state of Michigan and Michigan not being a part of the United States. If Detroit had its own king, it would be an independent state, and it could be considered a city-state in this definition. Next is the term cultural diffusion. And I mentioned that cultural diffusion is one of those really important topics that we really need to take a look at as far as how ideas spread. And as those ideas spread from one culture to another, it could be an idea, it could be a product, but more likely than not, one of the things that you want to think about with cultural diffusion is inventions. Today, cultural diffusion happens often. And talking about cultural diffusion, I'd like to take a break from the terms and talk about things that I think are really important in getting you ready for, of course, tomorrow's quiz. Number one, make sure that you are studying your notes, right? So if I were to diffuse anything to you from me as a teacher, former student, it would be to read your notes. Those outlines that we take, read those several times through tonight, several times tomorrow before you take the test. Use your review sheet, as I said today, to quiz yourself. Go through those terms. That's why I have you write them on a separate sheet. So go through each one of those terms, making sure that you have a really good mastery of each one. Once again, when you find a term in your notes, city, state, or cultural diffusion, for example, read the lines above it and below it so you get a full historical context of what those terms really mean. Number two, key piece of advice. I want to make sure that we're praying for the right things. Like, we don't want to pray for success on this quiz. There are so many more important things to pray for, right? What I would encourage you to pray for is not success on this quiz, but rather the health and safety of you and your family. You want to think about how blessed you are to be here preparing for a quiz. And you made me nervous about this quiz tomorrow, but you got to put things in perspective. Think about those people who are out there who are nervous about things that are much greater, like their safety, their survival, what they're going to eat, right? So we need to keep those people in mind. We constantly need to say the prayer of gratitude, thanking the good Lord for all the blessings that have been bestowed upon us. And when we think about that, that is what I think you should pray for. I think you should pray for guidance, and the guidance to use your God-given talents to the fullest. And that's all you can really control, is your effort and your attitude. So when you pray for the right things. Don't pray for success on quizzes. Don't pray for success in sports, but rather ask the good Lord to guide you to use your talents to the fullest. Say the prayer of gratitude. When you wake up, remember to say, thank you, good Lord, for giving me this day. When you get in your car, if you're driving, or if your parents are driving you and you get to school safely, thank you, Lord, for getting me to school safely. Thank you for giving me this day. If you can do that, you'll develop a relationship with God, and you're going to be a champion in your everyday life. Hey, next, and very important for our class, in the realm, how do we rep the realm? How do we represent the realm? We be here now, right? We come to class, we pop in history, we make sure that we are mentally focused on the task at hand, which tomorrow will be chapter 2 and the quiz. Last thing I'm going to say, last two things, as we talk about cultural diffusion. And one of the things that I want to diffuse from the way that I think to you is to say thank you to your parents. As a parent myself, I'm starting to learn about sacrifice and what that means. And so whether you understand it or not, I think it's important right now that you know that your parents do so much for you. They've made huge sacrifices. This is a good time to make sure you go say thank you to them and tell them that you love them. If you need to step away from this session right now, I think that would be something more important to say thank you, be grateful, express your gratitude to them tonight before you go to bed, now, tomorrow morning, what have you. Finally, we have to meet the challenge. My goal is to challenge you. I think tomorrow's going to be a greater challenge than chapter 1. It's designed to be that way. The AP part should be a significant challenge for you. So rise to the occasion. Don't shy away from challenges. Remember, challenges are good. Those are the things that are going to make you stronger as an academic student, stronger as a person, and that's what's going to help you get ready for the next level. So don't skip out on school tomorrow. Don't act like you're sick. Show up. Make sure you meet the occasion and be there and be here now and rep the realm. Okay, back to cultural diffusion, right? That was an example. I'm trying to ideas, products, all of those things are examples of how ideas are spread from one culture to another, one person to another, one civilization to another. We talked about some examples of cultural diffusion today and how commercials on TV spread ideas and products. Okay, next we're going to go into dynasty. Dynasty is a series of rulers from a single family, right? In class, we had a lot of examples of dynastic rulers. We picked a representative, a key baller from the class, and we said, oh, the Johnny X dynasty, right? Johnny X is the current king. He's going to pass it down to his oldest son. Or we said, or maybe it was Jenny X, and Jenny was the queen. She's going to pass it down to her oldest daughter. So a dynasty is a series of rulers from a single family that keeps running forward. Next is an empire. Totally different from a dynasty. An empire is where you bring several groups of people, several nations, or formerly independent states under the control of one ruler. We know that the first person to create an empire was Sargon of Akkad when he conquered all the city-states of North Sumer and all the city-states of South Sumer, bringing them all together under his control. Then we talked about the Babylonian Empire, which was under King Hammurabi's control, right? And in class, we had the example is, let's say the realm, our classroom, was a kingdom. And then we went and conquered the classes down the hall. We conquered Miss Aronoff's class and Miss Keller's class and Miss Richards' class. If we brought them all under our control, that would be an example of an empire. Okay. Chapter 2 is really predicated on rivers. So what those rivers did is they flooded. And we said that when we think about flooding now, it's kind of like a catastrophe or it's a disaster. But back in those times, the flood was something really beneficial because as the floodwaters sat over the soil, it created a very fertile soil called silt. In China, they called this loess, but silt is this fertile soil created by the flooding and then receding of rivers. Next is the term pharaoh. Pharaohs are Egyptian god kings that were believed to have almost as much power as the heavenly gods. So when we think about this, we have to understand that this is not only a form of rule, but a form of control, because what they're saying is, okay, our leader is also a god. So how can we really question this person, right? So that's a big way of keeping control over the people in some of these ancient civilizations. When you do that, when you combine government and religion, that's called theocracy. A theocracy is a form of government in which rule is based on religious authority, right? So in the case of Egypt, they have the pharaoh. In the case of Sumer, we learn that the earliest rulers were the temple priests. All of these factors play a role of theocracy. We learned about the fact that you have a class called theology at St. Mary's, right? Theo meaning God or religion, ology meaning study of. In this case, theo, God or religion, and krasi meaning to rule. So religious rule, that's what the word means. Next is the term papyrus. Papyrus is a plant used by the Egyptians to create a paper-like substance for writing and record keeping. What did they write on papyrus? They wrote hieroglyphics. Hieroglyphics, that's the Egyptian writing system, not English. The Egyptian writing system that involves symbols and pictures that stood for words, letters, or descriptions. Next, we're going to talk about some of the time periods. A lot of people had questions about today the Old Kingdom, the Middle Kingdom, the New Kingdom. I'll really tell you the one that you really need to focus on is the Old Kingdom. The Old Kingdom spanned from 2660 all the way to 2180 BC. And this was the time period in which the vast majority of the pyramids, or those tombs for the pharaohs or the ruling families or the royals, were built. So it shows, when you build these pyramids, it shows great government power, great organization, right? To be able to get these done, it shows a lot of wealth. And so if you're understanding what was going on during the Old Kingdom, you know that that was the most prominent period in Egyptian history. Next is a term called the citadel. The citadel came from section 3, which was our change-up section this week. It's basically a fortified portion of the city. It's usually the highest part of the city, so it's usually built maybe on top of a hilltop, and it serves as the temple and the area for the ruling family. Fortified means, in this case, it's protected by a stone defense wall, or an oven-baked brick defense wall, or a mud brick defense wall. Any of the civilizations could have a citadel. Next is a term called the dynastic cycle. This was really important in section 4 when we learned about China. Ancient China had this dynastic cycle, which was the pattern of the rise, the decline, and the replacement of dynasties. As we know, we had the Xia dynasty, then the Shang dynasty, and then the Zhou dynasty, kind of ruling in succession. But what causes them to rise and decline is this pattern known as the dynastic cycle. Also, the Chinese believed that their rulers had something called the mandate of heaven, which is this idea that God or the gods have put them in place to rule. Through the dynastic cycle, though, you can keep the mandate of heaven if you're doing good things and good things are happening. However, if bad things start to happen, catastrophes, raising of taxes, invasions, then the Chinese people believe you could lose the mandate of heaven, and then a new dynasty has the right to take control. That's really, in essence, the dynastic cycle. Okay, now we're going to get into some of our short answer and extended response questions. You know on your review sheet that there really were two possibilities, right? There were two possibilities. The first one is to compare and contrast Egypt and Mesopotamia. And I gave you a few clues as to how you could categorize that comparison. On your review sheet, it says compare the government systems, compare their geographic locations, look at how they treated women in society. How about their religious practices, right? So you just want to be able to compare these two. You want to talk about, when we say compare and contrast, we're talking about similarities. We're also talking about differences, right? So you want to be able to come up with some of each. An example that I came up with just thinking about preparing for this live review is to be able to compare the flood patterns of the rivers, right? For example, the Tigris and Euphrates, while it did flood once every year, it was very beneficial. We didn't know exactly when they were going to flood. That made it kind of difficult to prepare and plan your growing season. On the other hand, the Nile River in Egypt, they knew it was going to flood every July, and it was going to recede or go back to normal by October. So it was very predictable. It was very good for organization and the growth of key crops. Okay, next, the second short answer extended response possibility would be common practices of all the civilizations covered in chapter 2. So let's talk about those 4 key civilizations: Sumer, also known as Mesopotamia, Egypt, the Indus River Valley, and also China, right? All 4 of those, one thing that they had in common, which is basically the title of this chapter, early river-based dynasties, right? Our use of rivers, or being geographically located along rivers. So that would be one example that works for all 4. Now, whatever characteristic you put out there, It has to be evident in all four of the civilizations in order to qualify and get you points. Well, Mr. Langle, how many do I need to know? You need to know about 5 to 8. Putting one or two down is not going to get the points for you. You will not get the credit. You need to know more than that. I would say shoot for 5 to 8 commonalities among all four. You may have to think a little deep. That's a good thing. All right, next, we do know that we have the AP portion. The AP portion is going to be a little bit more difficult. It is going to be about some of the MCQs that we've been learning about. We watched the Heimler video. I showed you that the Heimler video link is in my grade book on the announcements tab under the weekly agenda. So now let's talk a little bit about the AP format. I have finished the AP portion. Remember, I said there's two versions. One has 3 questions, one has 6. Nonetheless, it's going to be a challenge. I would say that the first thing you need to focus on for all of the MCQs is going to be section 1. They're all pretty much predicated on our first early civilization based on the river, and that is the Mesopotamians and the Sumerians. They came up with a lot of firsts, right? First to create the wheel, the sail, the plow. First to have the writing system of cuneiform. First to have bronze metal. First to really develop an irrigation system. First law code at the Babylonian Empire created by Hammurabi, right? You're going to have 2 types of questions. One is going to be a document, okay? Thinking about Babylon, thinking about Hammurabi, code of laws, right? We learn about those things. You might have something to do with that. The second one is going to be an image, okay? The second one's going to be an image. Remember in the samples that I gave you the other day on Friday, we had some that were documents, some that were maps, some were images. Those were the stimulus, as we called them. And then you have the questions. Remember that Mr. Heimler says, read the question first, then read the information about the stimulus, like what year was it written, who wrote it, where was it created? And then once you have the question and the key info down, then you go and read the stimulus. After that, you answer the question. But remember, you have a limited amount of time, so you need to move through these in a fairly expedited fashion. What's that? Oh, I'm getting a special message. Hold on. Can you hear that? Please turn up your volume. Turn it all the way up. Oh, this could be interesting.
Hey, y'all. My name's Trapper John. I think y'all remember me. I was listening in to what Mr. Langle was saying today, and I got some special news for y'all. He was talking all that noise about, hey, we're going to have fill in the blank with word banks, and we're going to have fill in the blank without word banks. Well, I'll tell you what, when he got home, he was having a big debate with his family at the dinner table about whether or not it was fair to give them kind of questions. And everybody was chiming in. But Mrs. Langle said, ain't no way you're giving them no fill in the blank without a word bank. You got to give them kids a break.
Oh, totally gnarly, bro. I mean, Trapper John and stuff. Like, I was listening in too, and I totally heard Mr. Langle talking about forms of Cunei and tablets of clay. I was like trying to ride my scooter and stuff, bro, so I might have heard it wrong. It sounded like French and stuff to me, though.
Hello, governors. Sounds like a cheeky bit of clues for you there. Well, all right now. Hey, good luck now. I tell you what, just remember to be here now and rep that realm. Mm-hmm.
Well, a little commercial break, I guess. Trapper John took over my presentation and live review. I apologize, but sounded like there were some pretty important clues in there. You might have to watch the replay to catch them, but those clues, I think, could be paramount in helping you answer some of those AP MCQs. All right, at this time, all fun and jokes aside, let's get into the question and answer session. So give me a second. Let me go into the comments. Hopefully, I'll see that many of you are here. Appreciate it. Okay, let's see. We got lots of comments thus far. I have to check those out. Lots of Sir Duckies in here. I don't know what the Sir Ducky thing is, but seems like there's a lot of them in there. A lot of students that aren't even mine. Maybe they're coming in to get some help. All right. So one of the things that I want to see is any of the questions that you might actually have and need help with. Okay, so here's a real question right here. Here we go. What do we specifically need to know about Babylon, Egypt, Tigris and Euphrates rivers, and Upper and Lower Egypt and Indus River? Well, you're putting me to work there. So there's a lot of questions in that one, action-packed. Well, you need to know that Babylon was, of course, the capital city of the Babylonian Empire, right? So you want to know that it was located along the Euphrates River. Very important site, kind of became modern-day Baghdad. But within Babylon, you had Hammurabi and the Code of Laws, the first ever Code of Laws. Those are some of the things you need to know there. Egypt, oh boy, you need to know, everything about Egypt from section 2. The Nile, its importance, their major inventions, right? Like papyrus, pyramids, mummification, right? The first to perform surgeries, the calendar system that they made. How did they practice religion? The fact that they had pharaohs, all of those things are going to be necessary. So Egypt is really big picture. I want you to know geography, government, religion, culture, pretty much everything that we talked about in section 2. Of course, the Tigris and Euphrates, we want to know that they formed the outer lining of Mesopotamia, and they also flooded and they created great agricultural progress for, of course, the Sumerians. Then you have Upper and Lower Egypt. So Upper and Lower Egypt, those are the two separate kingdoms that Egypt started as. Upper Egypt is actually located in the south. It's called Upper Egypt due to its high elevation. It has a lot of mountains there. That's really where the source of the Nile flows into the Mediterranean. Lower Egypt was actually located in the north, okay? And so that was called Lower Egypt because of its lower elevation. King Narmer is the one who unifies Upper and Lower Egypt into one unified kingdom, which became Egypt and starts the empire and dynasties from there. The Indus River Valley, the Indus River is the major river that centered the cultural hearth of the Indus River people, also known as the Harappan civilization. So you want to know about the geographic nature there and the cultural practices of the Harappan civilization. Planned cities, right? Citadels, the fact that monsoons played a big factor. Tectonic plate shifts led to the decline of the Indus. The trade, the plumbing system that they all had. So hopefully that answers the question. Put me to work there. Thank you. I appreciate that. That's good. Let's see. I think within that question, I answer this next one here that I'm going to pull up. Yeah. So it says, what do we need to know about the Indus? I pretty much closed my answer with that. Master Jacob, I'm not going to answer the whole question for you, but I'll give you an example that I led. I said that the common practices of the civilizations, one common practice was how they utilized the rivers and the fact that they were geographically located along rivers. So utilizing that concept should give you an understanding of others that you can come up with. They have to be something in common for all 4 of the civilizations. Master Pearson says, who is Gilgamesh? A lot of questions about Gilgamesh today. So just for reference, Gilgamesh is talked about on page 32, but Gilgamesh is kind of like a Sumerian god king. He was a warrior, and we're not exactly sure if he was a real living person, but there is a myth or an epic poem about Gilgamesh. It's called the Epic of Gilgamesh. And in fact, it's really the first true piece of literature that we really have a documentation of in our world's history. It definitely is one of the first. All right, moving on down the list. Oh, we got some former students. Hey, Aubrey, how are you? It's nice to see you. Thanks for stopping in. Okay, can you go over the Middle and the New Kingdom? So most of what you're going to need to know is about the Old Kingdom. The Middle Kingdom, though, let me explain what happened. So at the end of the Old Kingdom, so around 2180 BC, so the Old Kingdom is 2660 all the way to 2180 BC. At the end of the Old Kingdom, so Around 2180, we started to see really weak rule from pharaohs. How does this happen? How does this happen? Well, let's say you get a bad pharaoh. Uh, they're really not gods. We know that, right? So sometimes they're just lazy. They don't get the job done. They're not good with economics. They're not good with military. And here's the problem. If we're passing it down in a dynasty, right? We know that usually the father is going to pass down his control to his son. So who's teaching the son? Well, it's going to be the father. Father, well, I don't need you teaching my son. I will. I'm the king. I will teach him how to rule. Well, unfortunately, if you're a bad ruler, then your son is more likely to follow in those traits. So he's not being taught the proper way. And that leads to like a domino effect of poor leadership and rule for about 150 years. Eventually, though, the Middle Kingdom, we saw some strong pharaohs come back into power and restore law and order. That's really what the Middle Kingdom is all about. Then, though, at the end of the Middle Kingdom, the Egyptians got conquered by a group from Palestine called the Hyksos. The Hyksos had war chariots. They defeated the Egyptians in battle. Okay. Eventually, the Egyptians copy that, which is a form of culture diffusion, and they become some of the best charioteers in war under Ramses II, if you remember that from the Bible. But nonetheless, the New Kingdom is when Egypt kind of reforms. They lead a rebellion and they overthrow the Hyksos right around 1520, 1500. They kick the Hyksos out and take back control. That starts the New Kingdom. Papyrus is a plant and it has really large leaves. It grows really well in the Nile Delta region that we learned about. So papyrus is a plant-like substance where they take the leaves, they dry them out, and it becomes a paper-like substance, actually. It becomes like paper or parchment, and they use that to create the ancient Egyptian scrolls. They would write hieroglyphics on it quite often. Sure. The mandate of heaven is this Chinese concept in ancient China where they believe that the ruler was given control by the gods. And so they have the heavenly blessings to be the ruler. Now, as you start to rule, if you're doing good, if everything's going well, the economy's good, agriculture's good, no natural disasters, they would say, all right, you have the mandate of heaven. However, when things start to go bad, like you get invaded, there's a natural disaster, they think, oh, well, this ruler must have lost the mandate of heaven. So now there could be a new dynasty that should be allowed to sweep in and take over. Okay, what should we know about Sumer? Same idea, geographic-based government system, religious beliefs, cultural beliefs, inventions, wheel, sail, plow, cuneiform, bronze, right? Irrigation, all of those different types of things would be what you should know about Sumer, and really what you should know about all of the 4 civilizations of the chapter as well. Okay, so geography of China. We need to think about the rivers, right? First of all, I would like you to remember that the rivers have 2 names each. The Yellow River is equal to the Wanghe. Either one of those could show up on the quiz. You need to know both names. The other river is the Yangtze River, also known as Changyang. Yangtze, Changyang, same river. Yellow River and the Wanghe, same river as well. So you need to know about the geographic locations there. You probably should focus on some of the natural barriers of defense, mountain ranges to the south, deserts to the north, right? Deserts and mountains to the west, ocean to the east. So that's basically what you're looking for as far as the geography of China. What is the main difference in religion between Egypt and Mesopotamia? Well, different gods, both polytheistic. So they're both polytheistic, right? They have different gods, of course. They have thousands of gods, but they're not exactly the same. One thing that I would say is their viewpoint on the afterlife. In Sumer or Mesopotamia, they believed in an afterlife, but they thought it was not a joyous one. They thought when you die, you just return into the soil. However, in Egypt, they believed that your afterlife was predicated on what you did while you were alive. So they believed in this concept of if you did good deeds, then you're going to have a joyous afterlife. However, if you did bad or evil deeds, then you're not going to have a very joyous afterlife. So they had this concept of a scale, and they said that when you die, it'd be like the weight of your heart would be measured. And if it was heavy or light, that would kind of determine your dictated afterlife. I think I talked about Gilgamesh. Just basically know that he was like seen as a warrior, a god king eventually in Sumerian society. And then there's a famous poem about his life called the Epic of Gilgamesh, which is really one of the world's first pieces of literature. Specific rulers, Thomas, you need to know Narmer, you need to know Sargon of Akkad, right? Other than that, I don't think that there should be too much specifics on key figures, but I would say Narmer, Sargon. Let's add Hammurabi. So Sargon, Narmer, Hammurabi would be the ones you will need to know. There may be some specific questions about them. Oh, this is a classic question. What is my hair care routine? Well, I don't have to worry about it too much. That's all I'll say. But I do use shampoo. I mean, I do have hair. I just shave it with a razor. You know what I'm saying? So there you go. Boss lady. Hammurabi's code is basically the first documented code of laws. It was a really harsh code. It was really meant to stamp out crime and prevent crime from happening. So oftentimes when you think about Hammurabi's code, it's known as an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Like if you blacken somebody's eye, they can punch you back. If you knock out their tooth, they get to knock out your tooth. But it also has some really extreme rules and laws. If you really read it, like if you steal from a merchant, they can chop off your hand. If you try to say that your slave master is not your slave master, then they can cut off your ear. There were a lot of like really harsh rules in Hammurabi's code. Yeah, eighth hour was a great class, Carl. No doubt. I miss you guys. Yeah, Sir Ducky, I know who you are. Yeah, I don't exactly know who you are, but I remember you from last year for sure. Yeah, you will need to know dynasties of China. You need to know the Xia dynasty, the Shang dynasty, and the Zhou dynasty. Those are really the three key dynasties of China that you would need to know. Riley, okay, good thought. These are not rulers of Egypt. You've listed rulers of Mesopotamia. Yeah, Mesopotamia. So you got Sumerians, Akkadians, Amorites, which eventually became the Babylonians, and then the Kassites. So just make sure that you understand that those are from Sumer/Mesopotamia, not from Egypt, okay? Okay, so Emerson, I talked about Hammurabi's code. That'd be one thing. You also need to know that he was the Babylonian ruler, which kind of created the capital city of Babylon. Other than that, the code of laws, the fact that he was a Babylonian king, that's what you want to know. Okay, Dev, so your commonalities would be of Sumer, Egypt, Indus River Valley, and China. Those would be your 4 river-based civilizations. You got to come up with 5 to 8 commonalities for all 4 of those, that all 4 of those had or exhibited. What do we need to know? Mostly the Shang dynasty, the developments, the inventions, the use of irrigation. As far as the Zhou and the Xia, just kind of need to know where they fall. But the Shang dynasty, which you guys are probably calling the Shang, but it's pronounced the Shang, that's the dynasty that you need to know about geographically. What did they do with rivers? How did they have economic trade, government systems, religious-based practices, so on and so forth. All of these civilizations practice a form of polytheism, yes. Narmer is an Egyptian king. He's the first to unite Egypt into one unified kingdom. So he combined both Upper and Lower Egypt. The video link is as I showed you in class today, Caitlin. It is on the grade book under the bulletin board weekly agenda. It is linked there under week 4 of the weekly agenda. So I was showing you on the grade book on the smart board today. All right, so you want to know Egyptian inventions: calendar system, mummification, papyrus. We know that they were some of the world's first surgeons. They set bones, they pulled teeth, they performed minor surgeries. Most of that came from their ability to, practice mummification. Those are some of the big ones that you want to know. As far as the Chinese dynasties, I went over those a couple of times, so you probably got those. I've gone over some of these similarities of Egypt and Mesopotamia. I mean, their treatment of women in society, they had very good rights back in those times, much better rights than they had even in the 1700s and the 1800s and other civilizations. So that's something that's similar. The way that they utilize the rivers when the flooding is something that's very similar. Their polytheistic practices would be a similarity. You could also use the way that they looked at the afterlife as a difference. I would say, though, also their substance that they built with, Mesopotamians used mud bricks for their buildings and defense walls, whereas the Egyptians used limestone and granite, right? So you got to look at those different type of things to be able to compare. So the assignment is just to number and define the key terms and the key figures. So you're not mandated to write anything down about anything else. Would I suggest that you do? Yes, I'm a big believer in that, but I can't overload you with work. So I kind of cut it off at key terms and key figures. And then I'm like, hey, you need to also know these things. It's up to you if you have time to write them down or not. I believe that writing things out can help you master it. I mean, at least that works for me, but everybody's different, Too much Sir Ducky tonight. I mean, wow, lots of comments in there, but interesting. I don't know. Honestly, I don't know who Sir Ducky is. It's one of my students, but they've been around for 2 to 3 years now, so I've never really cracked the code there yet. The difference between an empire and monarchy. So monarchy is just rule by a single person. So anytime you have monarchy, you have rule by a single person, such as a king or a queen, right? Empire is totally different. Empire is where you combine several formerly independent places or countries or states or city states, and you take them under control of one ruler. So that ruler could be a monarch. So let's say King Savio of the realm goes and conquers 4 other classrooms, right? You know what I'm saying? And we bring them under your control. You could be a monarch, but you've also started an empire, right? So they're 2 separate terms, really. So if you're talking about the compare and contrast Egypt and Mesopotamia, I would say probably 2 to 3 similarities, 2 to 3 differences. That'd be a good goal to go off of. Well, if you listen to the commercial, it gave you a huge clue at what some of those images might be. It kind of, in a roundabout way, is giving you that clue. I'm not going to come out and say everything, but I gave you the big clue there. And of course, the live reviews, once it checks the comments, so please always be appropriate in the comments. It'll check the comments, and as long as nothing bad or any foul language is put in there, it'll post right away, and you can rewatch this at any time. right after this closes off. What you probably won't be able to see are the comments, though. The comments will take time because they really do check those comments thoroughly before YouTube will post them. So you won't see the comments or the questions most likely until tomorrow if they're approved. The video, though, and everything that I've said will be right there posted pretty soon after. Really, you really need to know about the Shang Dynasty. And the Shang Dynasty is what the entire section was about. So the cultural practices, the writing system, the irrigation, the trade, all of those things are predicated on the Shang or Shang Dynasty. Kyle, are you talking about just your 8th hour or AP World History with Mr. Langle? No, that is the question at hand. Jordan, time spans are important. You need to kind of be able to put it into historical perspective. But as far as like, am I going to quiz you like what date did Hammurabi rule? No. I told you where the link is. It's on the gradebook under the weekly agenda, right? You should be able to find that easily if you understand the gradebook. I did show everybody today in class as far as where you can find that video. But as far as questions, there won't be any specific questions like what he said. I put it on the review sheet so you knew that utilizing the tools that he told you or the skills that he taught you would be helpful in answering the questions, right? That's the idea of that. No, the link in the gradebook is not under links. There's a link to Heimler's page, but you need to go to the gradebook bulletin board in the announcements tab. You need to go to your bulletin board for my class in the announcements tab. And from there, you then need to go to the weekly agenda, which I showed you today. And there's a link there that says Friday. If you missed Friday's class, here's a link to the Heimler video. Not specific dates. I promise you guys that at the beginning of the year. You're not going to have to know any specific dates. So I hear aura a lot, and I hear the word demure. I'm kind of understanding what they mean. I think this would be Sumerian agriculture was very good, very strong. So I'd say that would be, I'm guessing that would be positive aura. You can tell me if I'm wrong or right, but I think I'm using that in the proper context, positive, because they had such great agriculture. I'm not a big fan of like memorizing. I think you got to understand the concept. You got to know like what happened during this time span. So like just memorizing the dates really isn't going to help you much, but understanding that that was the old kingdom in Egypt. And of course, what happened during that time span, that's what's more important. Guys, keep the comments in the chat. I can kick you out if I want to. So just keep the comments in the chat. There's like some spammers in the chat. It's not really helping anybody, guys. Come on now. They are right on your review sheet under the essay possibility. So instead of being essays, they're going to become the extended response. So it says essay possibility. Let's see, right there. And then those two right there. No, those questions, Eva D, those are just showing you like what the questions look like. You don't have to answer those. It just gave you an example of like what MCQs look like. So the questions that you're going to see tomorrow are going to be content based on stuff related to chapter 2. So you don't need to know the answers for those. That doesn't matter. It's more about like, how are the questions formatted? I wanted to show you examples of how those type of questions look. So Sargon, what you want to know is that Sargon creates the world's first empire by invading Mesopotamia and conquering all of the Sumerian city-states. There's going to be one. It's going to be an extended response. It's going to be one of those two possibilities. I think I said earlier 2 to 3 for each, 2 to 3 similarities, 2 to 3 differences. Seriously? This is like serious stuff, guys. Come on. Yeah, so clay tablets would be how cuneiform was originally written. Cuneiform was originally written in the clay tablets. Farmers, you need to know where they fit and what they did. Of course, you know that they farmed for barley, for wheat, things of that nature. Do we need to know the social classes? Any social classes that were discussed in the sections? Yes. I think most of these other ones I've kind of already gone over. You're comparing the things listed, geography. So, what were their geographic ideologies, their geographic components, how they governed, how did they rule, how they treated women of society, were they treated as lesser, were they given rights, religious practices. Those are the categories that you're comparing. Yeah, the same ones that are listed on the sheet. I pretty much did this. Sumerian inventions: wheel, sail, plow, bronze, cuneiform, irrigation. Egyptian inventions would be things like papyrus, mummification, the calendar system, medicine, things of that nature. Yep, only one of the extended response. There's going to be one of those two possibilities. Yes, so you're going to have 20 points for the content portion, and you'll have 10 points for the AP portion. All right, folks, we've been on for 49 minutes. There were a lot of questions tonight. Hopefully, I did my best to answer them for you. I'm glad that you came. I really want to say I appreciate you being here. I'm going to close it off with giving you some final advice. Remember to pray for the right things. Remember to be here now tomorrow as you enter the realm. Also, remember to read your notes thoroughly as you get ready for taking this quiz tomorrow. I hope it's a challenge for you. Remember to rise to the occasion. And also, remember to say thank you to your parents for all the great blessings that they bestowed upon you. Say the prayer of gratitude. I want you to have a wonderful night. I will still be here. If you need me, you can send me an email. I will answer them to the best of my ability. But I just really want to say good luck tomorrow. Remember that this is just one quiz. It's not the end of the world. It doesn't make or break you. It doesn't define you as a person. So I really care about all of you. I love you all. You're like, the realm is a family. So I'm here for you if you need my help. But otherwise, have a wonderful night, and we'll see you tomorrow.